And how did you learn that it's actually called FinOps and it's something that exists in the world outside of your company?
I'll tell you the truth. It was through very naive Google searches, right? How to cut my cloud bill, right? How to reduce my cloud spend. How to identify opportunities to reduce cloud costs, right? I'll be honest with you, Alon. I never thought I'd work for a vendor. The biggest thing, and this is my opinion, okay? The biggest thing is...
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by PointFive, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FinOps in Action. Today, we have a pretty different episode. So if we always talk about FinOps practice and how to do FinOps better, today we're going to talk about FinOps career. And for that, we have a very, very special guest with a special FinOps career path. And I would love us all to listen to him carefully and maybe learn about the different type of career path for FinOps practitioners. So today's guest actually was FinOps lead at NBCUniversal, and then he decided to actually move to PointFive. Friendly disclosure, I'm the CEO of PointFive, so I work with him almost every day, and I'm happy to welcome Taylor Houck, FinOps Specialist at PointFive. Taylor, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Alon. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to get into this.
Yes, we're going to redefine what this friendly conversation is, because this is really a friendly conversation. And Taylor, every person has a unique story on how you got into FinOps. No one was born and said, okay, I want to be FinOps when I grow up. So how did you get into FinOps?
That's an interesting question. And I think that, like a lot of FinOps practitioners, I kind of tripped and fell into it by mistake. I mean, as you said, no one grew up wanting to be a FinOps specialist or a FinOps lead. It didn't exist when we were growing up, right? And the way that I got into it is, a somewhat typical path where I was managing, essentially I was a business operations manager managing the OpEx budget for an engineering team at a mid-sized software company. And essentially this was around 2019. We were faced with a challenge where our cloud bill was rising faster than our revenues, right? So when you looked at our OpEx budget, cloud was just climbing up the list and actually made its way to be our number 2 expense under headcount for the engineering department. And essentially at that time, my boss and the CTO of the business came to me and said, hey, Taylor, we got to figure this stuff out because it's unsustainable for our business to have our cloud expenses growing at this rate, right? And we're talking about the actual development expenses within the technology organization. So at that point, I kind of just dove into the weeds. I had some cloud experience, but I was by no means an expert, especially in the billing mechanisms. But it kind of was aligned with this kind of intersection of engineering and kind of finance and business skill sets that I had. So dove into it, did all my fancy cloud certifications, partner with our engineering leaders, and just started doing what I now know is called FinOps. At the time, we weren't calling it that. We were calling it cloud cost optimization, which is still a term that a lot of us use and I still use. Didn't know FinOps existed. And just through that journey, right, it was about an 18-month to 2-year journey over which we reduced our spend by over 50%. So it was quite impactful. Over that journey, I came to know FinOps. I came to see, the value that it can bring to an organization. I mean, I had never personally contributed to such a great kind of quantitative financial impact to a business before I got into this cloud spend world. And I kind of just fell in love with it and, realized that I could turn it into a career path. And now I have. So here we are.
And how did you learn that it's actually called FinOps and it's something that exists in the world outside of your company?
I'll tell you the truth. It was through very naive Google searches, right? How to cut my cloud bill, right? How to reduce my cloud spend. How to identify opportunities to reduce cloud costs, right? And then all of a sudden, I'll give all credit to the FinOps Foundation. They had a lot of, articles and content that was put out there. Started reading that, consuming it, using their QualRock crawl, walk, run framework internally, pulling it into some slides and presenting it to our leadership. Gained to know that they had, these virtual summits, started joining those, got frankly, quite involved in the foundation, started organizing meetups for them, right? And that's kind of how I got into the FinOps domain, so to speak, and saw it as, hey, this isn't just us that are struggling with this problem. And it also helped me to recognize, the company that I was at, we were, like I said, a medium-sized public software company, right? So we were by no means a behemoth, right? And I saw the quantitative impact that I was able to make at this company and kind of zoomed out and realized how big this opportunity was, right? Through recognizing the market size. And, if we're spending, call it 10 million a year, then these other companies must be spending an order of magnitude more than that, which means that the waste and the opportunity is orders of magnitude more than that. Okay, that's interesting to me, right? Let's dive in and figure out how to, grow in the space.
And then you basically moved to NBCUniversal, which is a big enterprise that you just described. So how was the transition and how was it different?
Yeah. Frankly, it was a lot different, right? Because at my first company, you could get in a room with all of the, engineering leaders that owned cloud budget, right? And we'd have calls and we're all together. When you get to major enterprise scale, that gets more difficult, right? And you're talking about numbers that are way bigger, and you're also talking about budgets that are way larger, right? So it requires a lot more of an executive view of FinOps and cloud spend. And also, frankly, the environments are much larger. Where at my first company, I myself could go and identify optimization opportunities, at NBCUniversal, I could do that, right? But I was only scratching the surface. I could only focus on the top 10% of the spend, or the top 10% of the resources, right? Like we knew at NBCUniversal, I worked a lot with our enterprise applications team, right? That was responsible for, as an example, our ERP system, which was run on SAP, right? We were running 9 terabyte in-memory database instances, right? Which are quite expensive. So it's like, okay, those I can focus on, but what about all the much smaller ones? It was harder to keep an eye on it, right? So trying to figure out how to automate and use systems to manage things was a much different experience for me.
So would you say that this was one of your key challenges, basically mapping where you have inefficiencies in your environment in such a large scale?
100%, yes. And it's so interesting because that it's all out there. You just, as an individual, it's very challenging to find it yourself, right? So that was a realization that I came to quite quickly, where it's like, hey, and it's funny because I was talking, at my first company, I had this big quantitative financial impact on the business. Come to NBCUniversal, all of a sudden, my net dollar impact was much larger, but the percent was actually much smaller, right? So it was interesting, and then you're aware just of how much more is out there, but how as an individual can you go out and find it all, right? And then you also got into at NBCUniversal, I had a lot more challenges with driving engineering action, right? And learning how to influence large engineering teams that have potentially competing priorities, right? With managing cloud spend. So I had my eyes open to, learning the best ways to work and enable change within an at-scale enterprise IT environment.
So share with us some of your insights. How do you make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and this is my opinion, okay? The biggest thing is humility and trusting that everyone is good at their job and wants what's best for the company. And my job as a FinOps person is not to make the infrastructure decisions, right? That's on the engineering team, right? These guys are the ones who, when there's a problem, when there's system downtime, they're going to get paged at 3 a.m. and be asked to fix that problem, right? They're the ones when performance isn't there, people are going to start asking them questions about that, right? And when you show up and are recommending it, saying, hey, I'm seeing idle resources, I'm seeing oversized resources that could potentially be changed. To them, that's introducing risk, right? And it's not FinOps' job to make that trade-off decision as to we should take this action and go with it. What it is the FinOps job is to provide the data and advocate for the cloud bill and advocate for the company's financial resources and help that engineering team make the most informed infrastructure decisions, taking cost as one element of the pie, right? Whereas, things like security, scalability, reliability are very, very important. We want cost to be added to that, right? So it's trusting that they know their stuff and trusting that I know my stuff and helping them understand that I know my stuff and I'm going to show up and add value to them and not just chuck recommendations over the fence and pray that they, take an action and I can show some savings on a dashboard somewhere.
Very interesting. And I'm really curious. You mentioned the difference between NBCUniversal to the other company you worked with. Like here, we had very high dollar impact, but as a percentage was lower. In the first company, it was different. Do you feel that you also created different dynamic and engagement with the engineers?
Across the two companies?
Yes.
So I think that it's similar in the sense where it really comes down to relationships. Where it's different is just the scale of it, right? And also the priorities. And one other thing to mention, I think that's actually, I just thought of this, it's important to note, is that it's not like there's one type of workload that exists in the cloud. There's many, right? So as I mentioned, in the first company, I was focused mostly on development workloads, right? When I moved to NBCUniversal, there were a lot of corporate applications, right? Back-end infrastructure that supports the business that is, production grade software that is the backbones of like the financial systems that are running a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, right? So when you're talking about like the development costs for a company that's building a new feature and trying out a thing, you can be a lot more, risky and chat with these guys and get them to understand versus in the enterprise environment when you're working with those engineers who are responsible for a whole different set of, success criteria, then you have to approach it differently with them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually a very interesting perspective. And I'm really curious. You mentioned that when you work for a very big enterprise, you learn to focus on the top 10% of your spend or resources. I'm curious on the personal level. Was it hard for you to basically knowingly ignore large part of your infrastructure and focus only on 10% when you know there are huge opportunities, the other 90%?
Yes. So the short answer is yes, right? And if I were to expand into that, really what it comes down to is that I had limited engineering time and resources that I can put towards cost optimization initiatives. Okay. So a big part of my job is how do I ensure that the engineering resources that we're allocating to, we can call it FinOps activity, is going towards the highest and best use of that time. And what that translates to is you have to focus on the biggest opportunities, right? You have to focus on essentially what is the highest ROI for every minute or hour that I'm asking a development team to work on an initiative. And what that translates to is you are going to ignore the 90, the 80% on the bottom. And as someone who is like out there always trying to like drive the most impact as an individual, which I think translates to me and also a lot of other FinOps people, it can be challenging to know how much more is out there. But when you mature, you understand that cost is not, it's not the only thing that matters. And also it's a trade-off decision when it comes to the resources and where you allocate them. So that's a challenge. I'd say one other thing that was a challenge for me, and this is something that if we're being honest as FinOps people, is just the reality, is how do you know for certain that what you're working on is that highest and best use, right? How do I know that in that 80% that I'm ignoring because it's not big enough, how do I know that in there is not actually the top opportunity that we should be focused on. And actually, what I'm scoping my engineering team to work on next month, next sprint, is the wrong thing for me to that is what scared me more than anything, right? Is like what's lingering out there that I'm not even aware, that's not on my radar, right? That is, to me, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to like that informed ignoring of the 80% that isn't important enough for us to focus on.
Yeah, because the engineering resources are so limited in the end. So you want to, or if you get that attention, you get the time, you make a good use of it. That makes perfect sense. And basically, Taylor, then you decide to move to a vendor. How did that happen?
I'll be honest with you, Alon. I never thought I'd work for a vendor. Like I'm just being, I didn't, I saw so much value in doing the practice of optimizing engineering spend. Going to a vendor was never interesting to me. Where it changed is, frankly, when I met you and saw the vision and the path that PointFive was working on, right? And essentially what I saw is a company that was very, very focused on solving my biggest challenges, frankly, which was this identification of actionable cost optimization opportunities, presenting them to you in an easy to use way, and giving you all of that data to support the recommendation and the findings, right? And like I was saying, me as an individual, like one of the things that I frankly was very good at and really enjoyed doing was combing through an environment and finding these optimization opportunities. But as we noted, I can't do that across enterprise scale environments, right? I mean, there's thousands of accounts. Even logging into each one would take too much time for me to do, right? And then as soon as you get through one and you move on to the next one, well, then something's going to change in the first one. You have to loop back around. So when does it end, right? It never does. And that's when it just like, it simply makes sense to me that software should do this job for us, right? And then it elevates the FinOps practice into not just digging for these opportunities, but actually, again, working on that prioritization and advocating for them and using the data that PointFive is able to aggregate and present to you. And it just, to me, it felt natural and like something that should exist in the world. And I thought to myself, I want to be a part of making this happen.
And can you share with us how your role looks like?
Yeah, it's an interesting role. You know, it's my title is FinOps Specialist, right? And I kind of operate across a lot of the business units at PointFive, right? I mean, one big part is working with our customers, right, and making sure that they're getting the most value out of our product and being kind of that peer to our users that understands what they're going through and their priorities. I'm also involved in a project that I'm very passionate about that's called the Cloud Efficiency Hub. And the Cloud Efficiency Hub, if you're not aware, listeners, please check it out. It's at hub.pointfive.co. It is the most comprehensive knowledge base library of these very service-specific, resource-specific cost inefficiencies that may exist within a cloud environment. And essentially what we did is at PointFive, we have a very, very talented research team that what they do is they find these inefficiencies that may exist within a cloud environment, figure out how to quantify that and detect it automatically, right? So we leverage their research to create this open source, this public library and knowledge base. And then not only that, we took it a step further and brought the community into it by saying, hey, actually, there are, frankly, there's almost infinite numbers of inefficiencies that could exist because of the complexity of these billing models, because of the number of services across all the major players. And everyone in the FinOps space, everyone, frankly, not even FinOps, in the cloud engineering ecosystem has a different experience in terms of the services they've worked on, the architectures, right? So people have different inefficiencies they may have run into. So what we did is we enlisted the community to contribute their knowledge into this public shared resource that others can benefit from. So we built this knowledge base that essentially, by including the major cloud providers, of course, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle Cloud, right, are the major four today, as well as data platforms, Snowflake and Databricks. We have very specific service level inefficiencies that can be very easily searched and queried by the user. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people that have actually used the Cloud Efficiency Hub to identify inefficiencies within their own environment and drive like real tangible value within their organizations, which like was always the goal of the project. So super excited to have been involved in that.
And it is very interesting that you start your career with Googling how to cut cloud costs and really work on online resources and in the community. And you find yourself now building online resources and developing and nurturing the community. It's like you're giving it back to the areas that help you build your career in the early days.
100%. And frankly, this is a resource that it should exist, and I'm so excited to be part of making it happen. And it's not just me, right? There's so many other contributors that have given their expertise and their resources to this. And it's one of the things that's special about FinOps, in my opinion, is that it's growing rapidly. I mean, the numbers of when people talk about 80-something thousand people in the FinOps ecosystem, I mean, that's insane, right? But it still feels so small, and people are so willing to share their knowledge and help each other grow. It really is a special place to be.
So Taylor, help our audience understand the pros and cons of working for a company doing FinOps internally versus working for a vendor and helping users and supporting the community.
Oh man, that's a loaded question alone. I think that the pros of working for a company and doing FinOps, I mean, number one is, as I've always, what drew me into this space is that quantitative financial impact. And when you're a FinOps practitioner, a FinOps lead, a FinOps manager, frankly, a cloud engineer that gets pulled into a FinOps project, you could have such a demonstrable impact that it can blow people's minds when they don't know that it's coming, right? I mean, we're talking about advocating for a change, working with people to make it happen, and then you watch the bill go down overnight, right? And you look at that change in run rate, and it's like, that's $1 million. That's $1.2 million. That's $500,000. That's 800, whatever it is, right? And it's like, that's real tangible value. And there's something that, at least for me, was very energizing about the ability to make such a quantitative impact like that. Cons, I mean, I don't like getting into cons. I mean, perhaps one could say that a con could be the fact that you may find yourself in some situations where you strongly believe that you could be making a greater impact if only you could garner more energy behind you and have more of a say in where engineering resources are being allocated, right? Because the reality is that FinOps, like I was saying earlier, FinOps doesn't own the infrastructure decisions, right?
Yep.
And I think that that's something that a lot of FinOps people, if they're earlier on in their journey, may not fully recognize, right? It's that you are a piece of the puzzle, right? And that cost, while it is your most important metric, is not everyone's most important metric. And again, I don't know if it's a con. It's just something that I think that people need to recognize, and that like, just because you see an opportunity doesn't mean that it's going to happen that next day, even if you feel like it could in theory, right? So that's one. In terms of working with a vendor, to me, one of the most exciting things has been just the opportunity to see more different types of workloads, right? When you're working with multiple different, like when you're working for a company, you are going to really very, very deeply understand your applications, your architecture, your systems, how you work internally, right? You're going to know that more than anyone, right? And if you bring in a vendor and they're working with you, you're going to understand that more than they are, right? For sure. But when you're on the vendor side, even though I won't go as deep as you in how those systems work, I'm seeing more environments, right? So I'm getting a broader view of how these different engineering teams are operating and the different types of inefficiencies that exist and the different services, as an example, right, that people are using, and inefficiencies that could exist across all of them. So I feel that it's something where you can get a wider view of the ecosystem that I've really enjoyed, right? And on the con side, again, I don't love going into cons, but you are trading off that, like, when we're saving people money, it's saving our customers, our clients, a lot of money, which has a big tangible financial impact to them. But like, no longer, I haven't shown up and cut PointFive's cloud bill in half. I'll tell you that, right? Because that's not my job, right? And that's something that you have to recognize if you're used to, you know, being in a FinOps role in an enterprise and driving that big financial impact to like their cloud bill. It's a bit of a different role when you join a company that operates in a different way.
So Taylor, interestingly enough, when you talked about the transition between NBCUniversal to a vendor, in your case, PointFive, you mentioned about the fact that now you can help other companies solve the challenges that you experienced. I wonder if there is also an aspect of scalability, meaning now I can not only help one company, I can help dozens of companies. And if that's part of the motivation of going to work for a vendor.
100%. Yeah, because as we were saying before, it's like when you're deep within an enterprise, you can make a huge impact at that company, right? But that's where you operate, right? That's your arena, is within that company. Versus when you can go and kind of work across many companies, all of a sudden that just exponentially can increase the first off, like the dollars of spend that you're touching, right? And then the impact that you're able to make. So it's definitely something that drove me. It's like, hey, what I'm doing here as a practitioner is great, but what if I could do this for many customers, right? And help many companies to solve this challenge and this problem that is frankly becoming a more strategic and important problem as the cost of compute becomes a more important business metric.
And I have another loaded question for you, Taylor.
Here we go.
Do you see yourself going back to be a FinOps practitioner?
Oh man. Frankly, I still consider myself a FinOps practitioner alone. I don't think I ever stopped being one, right? So, I mean, do I see myself going back and working for an enterprise, helping them manage their cloud spend? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of really good opportunities within this industry. I'll tell you that much, right? So if you're someone that is passionate about engineering and cloud and also has a pull towards business and finance and frankly, like the financial aspects of a business, right? Which a lot of people that are interested in engineering aren't as inclined and interested in the financial aspects. If you're interested in both and you go down this path of FinOps, what I will say is there's no shortage of opportunities right now in this industry. So whether you prefer to work within an enterprise environment, whether you prefer to work for, a smaller company that is just getting FinOps off the ground and never heard of the term, like when I started this journey, whether there's a vendor or there's consulting firms. I mean, part of what I've been doing at PointFive is working with some of our partners, and there's a lot of people doing really interesting things in FinOps as a service. I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities, right? So if you're a hungry person who's interested in this industry, I mean, if you've gotten to this point in the podcast, you're probably already there. There's a lot of opportunities. So it's an exciting place to be.
I agree. And I actually think this is a great place to wrap up what you share with us. I can share with you that on the last FinOps X, I talked to multiple FinOps practitioners and leaders, and I've heard quite a few say, hey, I've done multiple FinOps roles. I've led FinOps already in a few companies. I wonder what's next for me in my career. I heard it a lot.
Yeah.
And basically, you show that you shouldn't limit yourself to being a FinOps practitioner in an enterprise or in a company. There are tons of opportunities in the industry. It is an industry that's already grown a lot in the last 10 years or so. And you can go to software providers. You can also go to people who provide FinOps services, external service.
100.
Okay. And there are a lot of opportunities, and you don't necessarily have to stick to the traditional FinOps role. You can also go back and forth.
Yep.
I'm sure, Taylor, that there will be a lot of companies out there that will love to have you also as a FinOps practitioner, even if you made a certain, branch out to a vendor. I'm sure they'll be happy to take you back. So I think And that's what part of the goals for this episode for me, to open the minds of FinOps people to understand there are a lot of opportunities out there for you, and be open to different types of opportunities and different types of roles. There are tons of options out there.
Yeah, and if I may just add to it, I know we're coming to a close, but FinOps is changing, right? I mean, as we said earlier, the biggest thing that I kind of recognized when it got me into this space is kind of this recognition that the way that businesses are scaling today is more and more on the compute side, right? They're scaling with software and compute infrastructure, right? But the way in which they're scaling with that compute infrastructure is changing, right? I mean, as an example, how many people out there are insanely good at managing Databricks spend or Snowflake spend or OpenAI costs, right? Or there's all these different ways in which businesses are going to continue to adopt and grow and use these new services. And by the way, they're all going to be usage-based pricing, and their billing models, in my opinion, are not going to get any simpler, right? There are so many opportunities and it's always changing. So if someone feels like they're doing the same thing every day, you don't need to leave FinOps to get a change.
Absolutely. And Taylor, tell us a bit about you. So you live today in Connecticut. How did you get to Connecticut?
Well, my wife and I both grew up in Connecticut. I spent about 10 years living down in Virginia. We moved back up to Connecticut about a year ago. So I've been really enjoying it up here. It's a great place. It's a great place to live. What was the question? Like, what do I do outside of work?
I would love to hear what you do outside of work.
I volunteer at the fire department. So I'm a volunteer firefighter in my little town here. Essentially, the way that works is, we do training. And when I was living in Virginia, actually, I went through like the official like NFPA certification to like get certified to be a fireman. And now that I'm living up here to volunteer fire department, essentially we have weekly trainings. And then when a call comes in within our district, which is the district that I live in, I have a pager that goes off, respond to the firehouse, get on the engine and go. I really enjoy doing that. It's something that's just like completely outside of FinOps and work, that is just a fun place to go and build community there. That's, one of the things I enjoy.
That's great. And Taylor, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would like to consult with you about their career path. What is the best way to reach out to you and ask questions?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to chat with anyone. Frankly, I'm an open book. So, I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up, Taylor Houck, Houck. I was very impressed, Alon. You got the pronunciation right. I hear a lot of different things. I was when you were gearing up to say it, I was like, let's see what he's gonna say. It is Taylor Houck. You can find me on LinkedIn, Taylor Houck. That's probably the best place to find me. If you connect with me, send me a message there. I'll get back to you.
Cool. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Alon. Excited, and thanks for having me on.
For sure. And I would like also to thank our audience and our listeners who join us every week. I hope this episode opened your mind to different types of career paths. Taylor, thank you again for joining us. This has been another fascinating, exciting episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by PointFive, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with tip detection and remediation tools that drive action.